Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the January 20th meeting of the Public Works Advisory Board. Excuse me, I got a little excited here because we're a little late. I will call the meeting to order, and we have a quorum. We have all of us here, and so we will start with a moment of silence. Does anybody have any announcements? No, and we have no presentations, so we will open it up for public comment. This is any items that are not on the agenda. Anybody wish to come and speak? All right, seeing none, we will close public comment. Consent calendar, approval of the minutes of November 18th. Is there a recommendation? Everybody have a chance to look at it?
I move we approve the minutes as stated.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? No. Okay. Business items. The director's report. Did we all have a chance to look over the director's report? And does anybody have any questions or comments for Rob?
Yes.
Yeah.
We'll start with Debbie.
No, I don't have any questions at this time.
Okay. Jan?
Hi, Rob. I have a couple. First of
Sure.
all, as I'm reading this, the first thing under the water and the Choro Stream gauge, what is RCD and NRCS?
Oh, excuse me. RCD is the Resource Conservation District. They're a government agency that manages and assists farmers manage their land. And the NRCS is the National Resources Conservation District. It's what the old Soil Service was. It's a federal agency it's a branch of the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And they have an easement over the Choro Flats area that is a wetlands easement. So that's why we're talking to them. We want to put a stream gauge on Choro Creek, and they have an exclusive easement over the entire Choro Flats area, so we need their permission to put the stream gauge in.
But you have to have the stream gauge there anyway, right?
It's a permit requirement from one of the state agencies that we have to have a stream gauge there.
Okay, so thank you for that. The other one was not on here, but what's the status of the intersection on Main Street and Pacific? Remember we were going to paint the crosswalks or something?
Yes, our engineering team prepared to design. We're actually adding, as discussed with council, painted bulb outs there and then high visibility crosswalks. Mm-hmm. So they finished that design last week. We sent it to a couple local contractor, well, one local, one out of the area contractor, received 2 bids. One was in the neighborhood of $24,000 to do the paint, and the other one was $6,500 to paint. So we're going with the local contractor and looking to put that contract together this week. We have a window of dry and warm weather next week.
Yes, we do.
That it needs to be above 55 degrees for the paint to cure in a reasonable amount of time.
And dry.
So next week is our window of opportunity to do that work.
Okay. And thank you for that. And I have one more question. All around town at all the entrances and exits on the freeway, there are signs that say this ramp will be intermittently closed between January 4th and February 4th. And I've never seen anything going on at any of those. What is it for?
That's Caltrans is doing a project on Highway 1, basically from San Luis Obispo to, I believe it's to the Monterey County line.
It's near Hearst Castle, I think,
Yeah.
or north of Hearst Castle.
They're doing a rumble strip, so they'll be grinding a rumble strip by the white edge line. So if you're driving along there and you drift into the bike lane, you know about it.
Oh, okay, cool. All right. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, I just have two questions. On the nutmeg tank replacement, when do you honestly see that occurring, I guess, the actual construction?
The construction work,
Because it seems like it's been on there a while. I wasn't.
yeah, we went through a redesign
Oh.
of it. We were originally proposing 2 steel tanks.
Oh, okay.
And based on comments at the Planning Commission meeting with issues regarding visibility of the tank, we switched to a concrete tank that can be partially buried.
Oh, okay.
Our consultant, Canon Engineering, redid the preliminary design. Our environmental consultant, Swicka, prepared the environmental documents, and we'll be bringing that probably back to Planning Commission this spring. Probably construction window. It either will go this summer or next summer. If we don't make this summer's window, we'll put it off until next
So
summer.
the latest would be late 2017.
Exactly,
something like
yeah.
that. Okay, thank you. And the other question I had, this has always been a bugaboo of mine, actually. I was mentioning it when I was up here. Under your wastewater collections, I was kind of hoping Bruce would be here. It talks about they performed 7,000 plus feet of sewer main cleaning. Was that just in the month of December?
Just in the month of December.
And it's one of the things I always wonder people realize, and maybe I've got it wrong, but with the going to lower and lower flush toilets, what I see is a higher need for sewer cleaning as a result because the water, the flows aren't there to adequately.
There's more solids that settle out in the lines.
And I just wondered, just for my own edification, when you're using those Vector trucks, what do they hold, 3,000 or 4,000 gallons or something like that?
Yeah, something right around there.
And I just wondered, what's the trade-off? At some point, there was a reason why toilets were designed for 5 gallons back in the day, and it carried the sludge down to the wastewater treatment plant. I just always wondered, did anybody ever look at how much is saved as a result of one way or the other? Because it seems like there's a lot of committed resources, the crews working on the Vector truck and everything else going on in order to try to save that water at the, and I hear them keep going down. Now they're under a gallon a flush, and, it just makes me wonder, where does that end a little bit? And I don't mean to be rude about it, because I think it's important you save water, but I just wonder if it's a false economy there, where you're going to these lower and lower toilets and having to use water, because I assume you use potable water in the Vector.
Most of the time we're using non-potable water.
Oh, you are? Okay.
Unless they're way out in the system and they need to get some makeup water, then they'll use potable water from
Oh, okay, but they are using non-potable water.
They're using non-potable water.
That's good to hear, that part of it. I just wondered if anybody
It's usually a topic of conversation at some of the conferences, and especially when gray water systems get brought up, because that means even less water in the collection system.
Yeah. I always feel with every thing you do, there's a consequence.
Yes.
I don't care if you're diverting storm water from the bay because it helps flush the bay, or all these different things when you're trying to capture water from where it went before. There is that set of consequences as a result. And I just wondered if they ever actually studied or knew how much water you use. I hope it's a savings.
Yes.
Going to the lower toilets and spending,
especially using non-potable.
Yeah, that's true.
But we do have to clean lines for more reasons than just the solid settling out. So the Vector truck has a high-pressure nozzle on it that has a root cutting capability, because we do get root intrusion, and that's where we do a lot of our line cleaning, is those sewer lines that are in easements that have trees planted near them.
Sure.
We need to clean, not all grease and oils are caught in grease traps.
Right.
So we do need to get the grease balls that end up around the roots. Try not to be too graphic of what things that...
So basically, it'd still be needed in either case, maybe not as often.
Correct.
Gotcha. Okay, and those are the only two.
Okay.
David.
Sounds like crap to me.
Well, Jan went and asked all the same questions I was going to ask, so I have nothing to ask. Thank you.
And I apologize. I'll work towards lessening the acronyms and spelling things out when I put abbreviations in there.
Chris? Stu?
I've got a question about the tank on Nutmeg. Is it going to affect our water pressure when that ultimately is finished? And
It's roughly the same elevation, so it won't affect the water pressure. It's still at the top of Nutmeg. We'll still have pretty limited water pressure. We can't get any higher up the hill.
Well, I realize that, but down on where we are, on Hemlock, our water pressure, I've complained a few times about it. I can put a gauge on it, and it's 20 pounds sometimes. And then sometimes it depends upon when our neighbors' boost pumps come on.
Yeah.
And some
I don't
of them
think
have
you're
it.
on the Nutmeg pressure zone there. You're probably off the Elena tank there.
Yeah, aren't we on that one that's right on the Elena?
Yes.
The two tanks that are up there?
Yeah.
I wonder why the water pressure is low there.
Well, you only have that much head between that tank and where you're at. So,
Yeah, where I'm going with that is I heard some talk about the tank that's up on Nutmeg being tied into the tank on Elena so that we can even out the water pressure in the system.
yeah, we need to do some balancing of our water pressure, whether it takes a pneumatic pressure tank in some of those pressure zones or adjusting our pressure zone boundaries. But we have to do a little valving work to do that. The pressure zone boundaries that exist now are probably existed when the system was developed in the 50s, I would guess.
Wow.
So we're going to be rewriting our water system master plan, and that'll be one of the study areas is to look at the pressure zone boundaries.
So hopefully none of my neighbors are watching, but is it legal to have a pressure pump?
Yes, it is.
It is?
It is.
Okay.
Yeah. In fact, it's required for some of those systems that have to have fire sprinklers, and they have low pressure, so they need that pump to boost the pressure so that they get the flow out of the spray heads if there were to be a fire.
Of course, that causes whoever else is using on the street to drop in pressure when that comes on. Yeah.
Yeah.
Del Mar Park, just one little comment about Del Mar Park, and my lab is getting her feet dirty. And when will that hole be covered up?
Which hole?
There's a main problem out there. We had a leak at Del Mar Park.
Oh, in the irrigation system, yeah.
On the irrigation system.
Okay.
And they went from a hole that was a foot across to a hole that was a...
I'll have to get back to you on that. I'll talk to our maintenance staff and see when they're planning on finishing that work.
Yeah, now there's some wood covering up the holes and
Okay.
that kind of thing. So that's all I have.
Thanks. Well, I don't have any questions, but just for the sake of the people that are out there watching, if you would update us, Rob, on the storm damage and what help is available from the city and perhaps the consequences of it. I know there are some.
So this recent rainfall yesterday, we got about a little less than an inch and a quarter. No real storm damage. During the intense periods, it was raining about an inch an hour, according to the gauge at our office. We did have storm drain systems at capacity. It was probably jumping the curbs there. There's really not much that Public Works can do about that. We really can't change Mother Nature. And the streets are only designed to take so much water, about a 25-year storm. Previous to that storm, we did have a little cyclone that went through town that tore out, I think it was about 12 trees. I think I have it in the director's report, maybe 18 trees. 36 were hit, and I think 18 had to be removed.
Right.
And I may be...
Talked of 9 trees being
Yeah.
9 trees, okay.
Of 9 trees.
Well, my boss says you have to either divide my answers by 2 or multiply them times 2 sometimes. So that was really the most severe storm damage that we took.
But if a resident has any kind of serious damage that's threatening, the city will take action, correct? They can call to, is that right?
No, that is not incorrect.
That is incorrect.
That is
Okay.
incorrect.
Well, good.
Typically, the city will not protect, city public works will not protect private property. There are sandbags available at the local vendors and sand at the corp yard to fill those sandbags with. The fire department has a little bit more latitude on private property. If there's severe flooding, they can help out people, but Public Works is not giving those same immunities, and it's really a liability issue.
Okay.
We protect public property, not private property.
Okay, thank you. And I know one of the things in your report talks about the fact that because of the wet weather, you're unable to fix potholes. And so you might want to let citizens know that they may have to wait even if they have one.
And every day we're not, it doesn't hamper us every day. So as soon as the plant in Margarita fires back up again, we have a little project on Sienna Street to do about 8 tons of patching out there. But that plant needs more than 8 tons of work to fire back up again. They need a little bit bigger job. So it either needs to be county or Caltrans calling for asphalt also. Because we get asphalt from Paso or Margarita, and Paso is shut down for maintenance for a couple months. Margarita is just shut down for inactivity. So, but we still patch with cold patch in relatively emergency situations. So.
I just wanted to assure people that if you don't get to it immediately, there's a reason, and you will.
Yes, we will.
Okay.
We have a list of everybody's favorite potholes.
Thanks. And lastly, would you just update us on the coming wastewater treatment, water reclamation facility meetings? I know there's some opportunities coming up for the public to get involved.
Yes, so we have our regular meetings, the Water Reclamation Citizens Advisory Committee, which is the first Tuesday of each month. So we have one of those coming up on February the
Second.
2nd. And then we haven't scheduled our next public workshop at the city council meeting, but as soon as we have that scheduled, we'll let everybody know. I think the topic at the next Water Reclamation Citizens Advisory Committee will be talking about some groundwater issues in the Morro Valley that our consultant is going to report on. So we also will be rolling out a new webpage that is specific to the project. It'll still be accessed the same way that the existing page is, but part of the consultant team, they reinvigorated the WRF website. It has a place for both vendors and citizens to register for specific information on there so that they can be contacted.
Great. Thank you very much.
Could I ask one more thing?
Sure, Jan, go ahead.
Rob, back to you said that the city does not clean up private property, but conversely, what if private property issues run into the city? Like you said that there was above Juniper Street that extended into the city storm drain, the mudslide. I'm sure the city cleaned it up, but do the residents have any responsibility in reimbursing the city for the
So
cost
that
of
came from actually outside the city limits, from a piece of vacant property.
Good.
I think it was an act of nature. I don't think we really have any recourse on that one. There was no negligent acts that caused it. There was just a little bit of a slide from that private property that ended up into the city. And it went down Juniper, I think San Juan, ended up on Ironwood. It was quite a mess that we had to clean up there.
But just for information, if a property owner were negligent and it caused an issue with the city, drains or whatever, is the property owner responsible for the reimbursement of that?
They could be. I think it depends on the scope of the issue. If it's some bark chips ending up in a storm drain, I don't think, we're going to look to see where they came from. I really can't think of a case where it was a major issue. I mean, 2 years ago, somebody intentionally plugged a storm drain down on Main Street. They put a couple of styrofoam, I don't know if we're talking about styrofoam later, ice chest lids, and pounded them into the inlet. So that was kind of a challenging incident to clean up, and to get access, because we couldn't figure out why that storm drain was blocked. Kept raking it, and nothing was coming up. So once we pumped it down, and we could see the lids down there.
Oh. Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Rob. We will move on to item B2, which is the discussion of the expanded polystyrene regulation. Is that Jeanette?
Janine.
Jean.
Thank you and good evening. I'm not going to go into detail about the background that we already discussed back in November. Council had in September directed staff, they discussed this item, directed staff to come back with an ordinance that they were wanting to pursue. And there were a few questions in there and some information they wanted to get. They wanted the businesses to be reached out to get some information on the hardship provision that was in the SLO ordinance that they had reviewed, and some other things. So that's why the item got continued, because council was going to be hearing this item at their next meeting, which is going to be next week on the 26th. And that gave the opportunity to get that information back, because the surveys had only been out for a short period of time, and get that information back and be able to continue the discussion. And so that's what we're going to do tonight. So I'm just going to kind of dive right into that aspect of it, and we'll go from there. So Stu Skiff, one of your board members, graciously offered to walk the businesses after your November meeting to talk with them about the proposed ordinance, see if they were aware of it, discuss it with them. And then he also found out whether they currently used expanded polystyrene products for their food containers or their drink containers, and if they were aware of the proposed ban that council would be discussing. So through November and just before Christmas, and then just after Christmas, the first part of January, he did that. And I think he made most all of the businesses. I think there may be a half dozen that he didn't quite get to, but had quite a large sample of that. And so he had identified, he put together a spreadsheet that he sent to me so I can get some information in the staff report, and he had identified 85% of the businesses were already using alternative products for their food containers, and 35% were already using it for their beverages, and leaving 15% using expanded polystyrene products for their food containers, and 30, I have the wrong percentages in here, 66 were using it for their beverages, and 34 were not. And I had that corrected for the council staff report. So the 35 and the 35 and the 18 are actually 66 alternative products and 34 expanded polystyrene still. So we had also had mailed out surveys and had created an online survey through SurveyMonkey. And so we had a little spike when Stu started to go out and get a little bit more individuals, businesses responding to that. We had 30 in total doing that. And there is a little difference in the percentages. for the response. 52% of the businesses of those 30 that responded currently used alternative products, and 48% responded they still used EPS products. And I think that can be attributed to the fact that some used alternative products for their food container, but were still using EPS product for their drink container, so technically they were still using it. So I would kind of look to the information that board member Skiff had provided from his walkabouts and actually seeing and talking with the businesses. So attached you have a draft ordinance, which you'll see the main content of it is virtually similar to what you saw in November. We have the whereas clauses in there now. I had to draft this for council at the same time, and then some sections at the end relating to it's just format cleanup with ordinance items. The city attorney has reviewed it, and he did have some comments. They were all grammatical for the most part, a comma here, take out of that there. There was one item, and we will talk about the effective date in just a moment, but there was some language change in there. It doesn't change the intent of what staff is going to be recommending, but it is a little different than what you have in front of you from what council will see next Tuesday. So with regard to the hardship extension, council had indicated that they wanted to include some kind of hardship extension. They also wanted to get a little bit more information because they weren't quite sure how many businesses may have already transitioned to alternative products or not. And so as part of the survey that we had done, we had asked a question about a hardship extension and what percentage increase in total operating costs, not product cost, but total operating cost, the business felt would be acceptable if a hardship component was built into the ordinance. And on page 14 of your packet, a little more than midway down, there's a paragraph that includes the percentages of responses from that. 38% were responding 10% or less, 23 responding between 11 and 15%, and then they kind of drop a little bit from there. The SLO City ordinance had built in an affordability criteria for their hardship as 15% of the product cost, so an increase of the product cost, not total. And their hardship exemption was a one-time, 1 year only. Their ordinance went into effect January 1, and they were taking applications through November or the first part of November for the hardship, and they had only received one request from a business for the hardship exemption. After your November meeting, the City of Pismo Beach had adopted an ordinance that was virtually similar to the one that San Luis Obispo had adopted. There were a couple of differences, one being on the hardship exemption. They have it included, but they didn't tie any specific criteria to it, so they don't have an affordability index or cost component with it. Their council made the determination that since most of their businesses had already changed over, that there was enough time between when they were going to have the ordinance become in effect, and the ability to have an in lieu option that you would pay to get alternative products rather than be fined, and a short amount of time for storage of existing content to be used up, that they had a shorter period of time, and instead of it being a 1 year one-time extension, they've made it a one-time 6-month extension. And so we have a couple of different options that we were looking at for, and I'm sorry, then they also had mentioned they still wanted to include a hardship component in the ordinance because there may be some of those businesses who hadn't transitioned yet who may have a hardship need and wanted to still provide that. But they also were recognizing that there are different business types, and what might be a hardship, a percentage of increase for one business, might not be for another. So the business would make their case for their hardship, and then it would be determined based on the type of business, size of business, whether that they would accept that or not. So in terms of different options to consider, one was the slow approach, which I talked about. One is the Pismo Beach approach, which I just talked about. And the other two that I have listed here on page 14 really are coming from the percentage that was yielded from the survey results, and then just having a different length of time for that, whether you would have it be a 1-year exemption or a 6-month exemption. So staff has, after looking at the survey results, after talking with the cities of SLO and Pismo Beach, and looking at the information that Stu brought forward from his visits to the businesses, staff is recommending kind of the Pismo Beach approach, which is basically to not have a specific affordability criteria in there, but still having the option for a hardship. So those few remaining businesses who haven't made the transition yet, if there is going to be a hardship for them, they can apply to the city and make that case, and then we can make that determination based on the type of business and size. And additionally, having that be a one-time 6-month exemption. With regard to the effective date, generally ordinances go into effect 30 days after final adoption, but the City Council can always adopt a longer period of time before the provisions become effective and any kinds of fines or real enforcement would take place. And as noted before, the SLO City Ordinance, theirs went into effect 6 months after their adoption. So they had adopted their ordinance in July, and it became effective in January. Pismo Beach had a different adoption or effective date. They did theirs 30 days after adoption of their final ordinance, and that occurred in December, mid-December. So mid-January, I think last week, is when their ordinance took effect. And so given the council's desire to reach out to the businesses, make sure they were aware of any proposed, any adopted ordinance and proposed ban, and wanting to get that kind of voluntary compliance down before the effectiveness of the ordinance, 30 days for the effective date really didn't seem to be workable. And then at your board meeting in November, there was some discussion that depending on the timing of when an ordinance would be going to the council for adoption, to try not to have an effective date be during the summer period, because that's when businesses and restaurants would be really busy focusing on the summer season and not wanting to have them worry about using up their stock and transitioning over to new alternative products. And so in looking at when the council potentially could adopt an ordinance, and then 6 months from that would place it in sometime in August. So the third alternative, which we outline here, is to extend that time a few more weeks and actually have the effective date be after the summer season on October 1st. So that is what staff is actually recommending, is to make that effective date be on October 1st. So that would allow enough time for businesses to be educated about the adopted ordinance and the ban that would be coming in place. It would give them enough time to transition their old stock out and transition to the alternative products that they would be changing over to. And in terms of a hardship, they still would have that opportunity to apply for, and if they were granted, get 6 months from the kind of the effective date, which I would look at that as being the October 1 date, as really when the enforcement date would be.
Janine, I'm sorry. Can I ask a quick question? So in what you're recommending is to get rid of the percentage of hardship, how much, and it's just basically like Pismo, where you come in, you ask for it, and then you guys make a discretionary approval. Okay,
Correct.
Thank you.
And then the last item, which we talked about briefly in November, was with regard to non-city sponsored special events. While the council didn't formally indicated to include this segment in with the ordinance. It was included in SLO City's ordinance and in Pismo Beach's ordinance. And given the fact that council has previously adopted resolutions prohibiting the city from purchasing polystyrene products for use in city facilities and for encouraging those or prohibiting those who we have a city sponsorship for special events, that it just seemed to make sense to bring in that last little section of those who are non-city sponsored special events into that ban as well. And I think there was some mention to just make sure that those who would be applying for use permits for special events, that they're made aware of that. And we do have a public area use permit process where groups apply for a permit to use a particular city facility, and in there are particular conditions. So that's something that would be included with that. They would be made aware of that prior to finalizing of the permit and their final conditions, so they'd be able to relay that to the vendors that they may be having as part of their event. So for those three particular items that are listed for the staff recommendations, all of that language is in the current proposed ordinance that you have attached to your staff report. So if the board has any recommendations different from that, we can bring that forward to the council for their consideration as well. So with that, what I'd like to do is turn it over to the board for any questions or comments that you have, and then any particular recommendation for council to adopt the draft ordinance that's attached to your agenda.
Thank you very much, Janine. And thank you, Stu, for your extra work. We really appreciate it. That was very helpful. Any questions? So that we're just going to ask questions at this point.
Yeah, do you want to start?
Well, you can start down.
We'll start with Stu.
I can say this, the merchants are all basically behind it. They know what polystyrene does to the ocean and some other things, so they are behind it. One thing that would help the merchants out and getting some feedback from them is something that says we don't use BPS or we don't use polystyrene, or making a little sign that they could put on their counter, so they know that if somebody walks in with it, that it didn't come from their establishment. And that would help. And most of the grocery stores, in fact, all the grocery stores, Albertsons and Cookie Crock and Spencer's, and also the little markets, do have polystyrene. And I don't know if the ordinance covers the grocery stores. I would imagine it does. And I told them
it brings up raw meat can still be in those styrofoam packets, as I read your ordinance.
Correct. That is an exemption. But the sale of the polystyrene plates and cups and the ice chests that are not encased in a hard plastic.
As a matter of fact, Cookie Crock at the time I was in there had probably 20 or 30 of those styrofoam ice chests. And she says, well, what am I going to do with them? I said, put them on sale. Don't order anymore. So actually the response is real good out there from the merchants. And I didn't manage to get all the merchants. And some of the discrepancies in what I found, what I was told by the manager, and then what the ultimate owner of the business says are sometimes different. So, but we're going to get on with it. And I did talk to some merchants in SLO, some of the hamburger stands there, that use those large styrofoam cups. And they said, yeah, we know we've got to move on. And one of them commented that it's going to cost him double, and I don't know about that. But so it'll go on, just like the plastic bags did. Thanks.
Thank you. Chris, any questions? No questions. Okay. David?
I was also going to touch base on more coverage of retail sales of that, but Stu covered that, and you answered that question very well. So that obviously language should be included. I feel that the council has taken some great strides to expedite this as quickly as possible for the good of the environment, and yet are giving a lot of concessions and a timeline that's very mindful of the merchants in town. So I think it's well crafted, and I look forward to it moving forward.
Okay. Any questions?
Yeah, no questions. A few observations real quick. First of all, you did take care of some of my concerns from last time, and especially on the noticing of non-city events to those people. If you make it clear to them when they pull their permit, you have a lot less problems. The last thing I'd like to see is a group of tourists here on an event and getting, they don't know the local ordinances that are in play when these things are still legal here, in the country or the state. And it sounds like you'll take care of that with the permitting process. The hardship clause, I'm kind of still waffling about, only because you're giving them basically about 10 months. And Pismo put the hardship clause in place because they enacted the ordinance 1 month after they passed it to allow these people to get out of it. I feel you're actually giving people enough time to go through any existing stock. But if the city council wishes to keep a hardship clause in there, I have no issue with it beyond that.
Just want to point out that possession of styrofoam will not be a crime. So if tourists do buy it in another city,
no, I follow.
They could use it for their own personal use. Sounds like I'm talking about another product, but I'm not.
And the only third observation I had was the date of implementation. I think I was the one who probably brought up of trying to get through the summer season. I was hoping you could put it to October, whatever is the Monday after the Harbor Festival. You're probably within a couple days of going through probably one of our largest events here. So, if you can, I'd try to swing it out to the 3rd or 4th. I'm not sure when it happens this year, but I doubt it's the 1st. That would be my only comments. Otherwise, I think it's well written. I think you guys did very well with it and did listen to our concerns. And I have no problem recommending moving this forward to the city.
Jan?
Yeah, I like that the following the Pismo model for the hardship, because that puts the responsibility more on the business instead of having a flat line or percentage of if you fall in this range or something. So they have to prove why it's a hardship, and I think that's a better deal, that they have to show responsibility or get into it, and they might find out that it's actually cheaper in the long run to do this. I was interested in you said 85% of the people responding, Stu, did not use. I obviously didn't go to those restaurants because in the last month I've been involved with eating in different places, and somebody in the group asked for a take-home thing, and we were all given styrofoam. So we're obviously in the 15%, visiting the 15% of the restaurants. But I was really disappointed to see that they were still using that. And the other thing, just a question: if you wanted to give businesses know this is happening. Because of the survey, they know it's coming down the line. They know the city council's been talking about it. We've been talking about it. It's going back to the city council. So is that enough time to give them a heads up so that we could maybe make it a 3-month implementation so that it would happen before summer instead of waiting through summer?
That's certainly an argument that the board, if you have a majority, that want to make that to the council and have an alternate recommendation going to them on the effective date. Mm-hmm. That's certainly something the board can do.
Okay, because I don't think this is jumping out of nowhere for the businesses. They know it's coming, so it just seemed like that would be a feasible thing. Thank you.
Debbie?
Well, I think differently than everybody else. I'm sorry, but I just don't get this. I must have missed the whole thing because I don't understand how 85% of the businesses in this town already know about this ordinance and know what they're going to have to do and generally know what's going to be required of them, and we're going to give them all the way to October to implement it. And I'm like, I don't know what we're waiting for. It's like waiting for the presidential election. Right. How many of these commercials do I have to hear? I mean, they already know. 85% and 6%, and only 6% said they were unaware. So I don't know. I appreciate the council. I appreciate everybody taking their time and really being generous to everybody that has a concern and trying to solve all of those problems and everything. And I think they've done an excellent job. Staff has done a great job. But this is kind of like beating a dead horse in my mind. And I don't know if, like Jan said, why would I as an employee or as a business order all my product for summer and then have it end in October and I don't sell all my product? Then I got all this product for winter that I can't get rid of. Why wouldn't I want to stock up in March and have it all there so I know that I'm going to get through the summer and be done by the end of summer? I know, I'm sorry, I'm a little... I get very frustrated because I don't understand. But on Stu's note, I think the signage is really good for the businesses because it not only lets everybody know that they're not going to get any styrofoam, but it also brings out the pride of being the kind of town that we are, where, hey, look, we are really helping our oceans. We're going to make your beaches prettier. We're going to do a lot to really improve the environment. And I think that's a sign of pride that should be given out to the merchants as well, is to let people know what we're doing and why. So I'm done.
Well, I have a question, and then I will make some comments, but I see we have some folks in the audience, so if you wanted to speak to this issue, you could do that. But I'll ask my question first, and that had to do with the Pismo approach, which I basically like, but I'm just curious to know what kind of a process you might put in place to review those, and if there would be any kind of criteria that you would use, and who would make that decision, that sort of thing. So if you could just respond to that.
In the ordinance, the determination, basically it's an application that's made to, a written application made to the city manager and or his or her designee that they're requesting a hardship for the hardship exemption, and then they're making their case. And that could be their product cost, or they have a storeroom with a year's worth of supply, or whatever it is that for that particular business and their particular circumstances, they would lay those out. And then it really kind of becomes more of a conversation. If the city needed a little bit more information to, if they needed to make their case and they weren't quite making it, but you could kind of see, well, I think I know where you're going, and getting some more from them. There's that ability to be able to do that rather than just have a rigid kind of a picked from the sky, because that 15% that Slow City had, we don't really know where that originated from, because other cities who had already adopted ordinances with a hardship exemption had 15% as that number. But nobody knows really where that number came from, or how that number may relate to the businesses in that community or in our community. So that's why we felt that the Pismo Beach approach that kind of left it up to the businesses. You know your business and you know what would be a hardship. You give that information to me, and then we'll make a determination on whether or not we agreed with that. But as far as process, that would be the city manager or his designee would be the one who would be reviewing any of those written letters that come in with that information and making that determination.
Thank you. Did you wish to speak to this issue? Please come forward. State your name.
Good evening, members of PWAB and staff. My name is Rick Dashler, Morro Bay. I fully support most of the provisions of the proposed ban on the EPS product use in Morro Bay. It is imperative that we do our part to control the damage done by this product. With that in mind, I disagree with the recommendation to have the effective date be October 1st. This will allow a tremendous amount of that product to be used during that period of time. A better effective date would be either May 1st or May 15th of this year. This meets the concerns of council by providing a sufficient time for notification of businesses so that they can use their existing stock and find alternative materials. It does not require them to make the transition during their busy summer season. This issue has been discussed in the newspapers and community since at least last November, with members of PWAB and the city contacting restaurants and merchants about this pending ordinance. Everyone is aware that the cities of San Luis Obispo and Pismo Beach enacted similar ordinance, and they expect that it is going to happen here also. Do you really think these users and merchants have space to store 6 months of EPS products? The next 3 months is sufficient lead time to resolve their issues. Thank you, Jan and Deborah.
Okay.
The purpose of this ban is to reduce and eliminate the use of EPS products as soon as practicable, and making May 1st or May 15th the effective date gives everyone time to use their existing stock and find alternative sources before the busy summer season. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rick. Well, I haven't spoken yet, and I have to say I agree also. That was my main concern with the ordinance, was that we shouldn't wait that long to put it into effect. And I agree with everything that's been said with respect to the public has had sufficient warning, the merchants have had sufficient warning, they've been visited, they know it's coming. Very few of them were unaware of it, and so I would agree completely that we should move up the date. I was thinking June 1, but whether we pick May 1, May 15th, or June 1, certainly before the summer season starts. So with that, is there any further discussion from others who have not spoken to this issue of the effective date?
Well, I guess the only thing I'd ask is you might want to poll the group before a motion's made
Okay.
to give them direction on
Okay.
which way we tend to go.
All right. Stu?
I'm for moving it up to May 1st. I think that'd be a great idea. And I don't believe that there is as much
Your mic.
I don't believe there's as much supply out there as we think there is. I was in the storerooms and some of the other restaurants.
The clamshells don't seem to be around anymore, and some of them are using the little paper ones with aluminum foil in them. And so they're inventive merchants, and I think we'll find that if we do that, they'll find a way to get around it with their suppliers.
Okay. And can I also ask at the same time if you would address the issue of the Pismo? Would you also go along with supporting Pismo's approach to the hardship clause?
Yeah, I believe that would be good too. I don't foresee much in hardships when you visit the restaurants in town, but
Okay.
offering that option is very good.
All right. Thanks. Chris?
Yeah, I'm for also pushing it. I'd be fine with the May 1st date as well. That way it's prior to the beginning of summer. And I'm good with the Pismo hardship.
I'm also in favor of May 1st and following the Pismo hardship as well.
Okay, thanks. Stephen?
Well, I was the one who probably brought up the later date, trying to make it easier on the businesses. And it's not just restaurants, it's also the stores that sell the product. You're putting them in the same boat. I don't have a problem going along with the group on the earlier date, as long as there is a hardship exemption in there that doesn't classify by percentage. Because at the end of the day, I feel sorry for the city manager when he's going to say, yes, you can have a hardship exemption, but no, you can't. But that's what happens when it's a very subjective kind of situation. And at the end of the day, if everybody who needs the exemption polls for it, you'll be out around October 1st anyway. I was just trying to eliminate that whole hardship exemption side of it. And, polystyrene's probably been around for the last 50 years. I figured 10 months wasn't going to make a big deal of difference. But I could go along with everybody on the board with the May 1st as long as the hardship exemption's in play.
Well, Stephen, I think the hardship exemption sort of counterbalances that earlier start.
That's what I'm saying.
Right.
Basically, as long as there is, I was trying to eliminate the hardship exemption in its entirety and let every business have that opportunity. Because at the end of the day, there are some businesses that go through that stuff quick. I'm not sure how quick a supermarket goes through styrofoam plates or other things that they have on their shelves.
Right.
And so you're lumping them all together, but that's fine. I can deal with it as long as there's that hardship ability that they have an additional 6 months. And it sounds like you've got it in there, and it's not based on trying to meet some 15% criteria.
I think it's also the case if we look to SLO and only one business applied, and you look at how much compliance there already is, it isn't going to be that big of an issue.
That's why I say I do not have a problem moving it forward, but I was trying originally to get rid of that hardship exemption.
And Jan?
Well, I suggested moving it up to like 3 months because I didn't want to see us go through summer with all the extra tourists, all the extra stuff. So I'm glad that people are in favor of thinking that. And I like the hardship from of Pismo, yeah, the hardship exemption.
I agree. May 1st, Pismo Beach.
All right. Can we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to recommend approval to the City Council on item B, I think it's two.
B2.
B2 regarding the new ordinance for the expanded polystyrene regulation with the implementation date of May 1st and with a hardship exemption that does not require a percentage of hardship or percentage of cost, and to be made subjective to the City Council based on the business coming in and requesting said waiver.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Sorry. Was that city council or city manager? You said city council?
I said city manager makes a determination of who actually gets the. Isn't that how you have it written?
Correct. And I was just going to chime in that the hardship part that you're talking about is the Pismo Beach approach, and that language is currently in the draft ordinance you have.
Correct. It's the one that doesn't have percentage of hardship or whatever you call it.
There's no criteria that is.
Yeah, it's just a subjective call by the city manager is what I understood.
Do we need to clarify that motion and remove some of it?
I think you just did.
Okay, good. Right, great. And we have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. All right. Well, that was it for our meeting. We are ready to adjourn, and our next meeting is going to be Wednesday, January 17th, right here at 5:30.
February 7th.
February. What did I just say? January?
We're moving back.
Oh, yeah, we can't do that. It'll be February.